Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about unbeaten Leo Santa Cruz against unbeaten Carl Frampton. If you walk into a room, I'm guessing there are going to be ardent supporters arguing for both fighters in a head-to-head matchup, right? If you're someone who predicts fights here online, what could possibly go wrong in this fight where it's evenly matched at first glance, right? Where you're looking at the guys and both guys are unbeaten and there doesn't seem to be a consensus on who wins. I do think there's going to be a clear winner here. The best way to present that case is with a drinking analogy, as ridiculous as that sounds. You remember back to your high school or college days when you were a relatively inexperienced drinker, you were unskilled in drinking, right? You remember being at the bar, the pub, whatever, the back alley, and you remember drinking whatever. Right? We were all teenagers once. You remember drinking whatever. And, right? You were an amateur at the time. Beer, perhaps wine, perhaps you mixed the two, right? Things like wine coolers. You weren't thinking in terms of, wow, is this vodka? Is this gin? Whatever, right? You're mixing your drinks and stuff like that. But yet, because you were young, because that's the way you saw the world, because that's the way your body was at the time, the next morning you woke up, no hangover. As reckless as you were, you didn't even know the risk, did you, of a hangover? Because hangovers didn't happen to you. Right? Years later, you're older. You're a more skilled drinker. You know the alcohol that gives you a hangover. You actually have your own drink, your own brand, right? If you're buying a beer, you're at the bar. It's not, hey, give me a beer like it was when you were 18. Now it's, take a Heineken, right? I'll take a Sierra Nevada. I'll take a Sam Adams, whatever your drink, right? Now, too, you know about pacing, right? You're looking at the clock. In fact, you know about pacing to the point where you're able to make happy hour, right? But before you leave, you're looking at the clock. You understand, hey, I can't have that last drink because I don't want to get busted for DUI. Maybe your game even includes saying to the bartender, hey, can I have a glass of water? Right? Maybe you're even mixing in the water with the drinks, right? Maybe if you're a mixed drink drinker, maybe you're even mixing in ice cubes. In other words, your thought process is much deeper now. You're much more experienced. You actually have memories of hangover, sluggish day, right? So now you're an older skilled drinker. But yet you wake up the next day and your body still feels worse than it did when you were 18 years old. Right? That's the way it is in boxing to me. There's some young guys out there who have never experienced a car crash or anything close to a car crash. Right? They do unto others and then that's the end of the story. There's no second part of the equation. You try to explain karma to them and they give you a blank look. They just don't know. They're alpha. They're young. Right? The risks, what are they? They're at the pub or the back alley, figuratively speaking. I'm not saying literally here. Right? They're chugging on a 40 or whatever. No thought of anything other than waking up the next day to make it to work. Right? That's the way I view Leo Santa Cruz's approach to the sport of boxing. Understand, Many of you have given me a hard time here online because I firmly believe that if Santa Cruz were to fight Guillermo Gundio, who Frampton has chosen not to fight, I believe Santa Cruz wins that fight. Right? Santa Cruz is in the sweet spot where he can wake up the next day without a hangover, so to speak. In the ring, he can take risks. He can push the action. He can fight at a tempo. He can take your punch while dishing out his punch, right? Without the kind of consequence that an older fighter has to deal with, right? So, let me say this. After that momentary technical glitch, right? Different computer, you know the rest. I believe Frampton's different. Frampton's the guy at the bar who's pacing himself. He's thinking of every millisecond, right? He's the guy who is waiting for certain setups so he can counter you. Right? He's hoping to put you in certain positions before he attacks. He needs a measured pace. Let's put it into numbers. Leo Santa Cruz in a fight against Munoz just last year. In other words, these are relatively recent numbers. Right? Lead puncher. Right? In that fight, Santa Cruz, very first round, feeling out round. That's what some people call the first round. Santa Cruz comes out, throws 93 punches. 93. We get to the next round. Santa Cruz comes out, throws 97 punches. So you're thinking, you know what? 93 punches, 97 punches. He can't possibly maintain that pace, can he? Older fighters would be thinking, you know what? I need to slow down. There's too much risk involved. I've been in fights where I've felt hungover in the later rounds. Too much partying in rounds 1 to 3, not enough gas left later in the fight. Right? So an older fighter, no matter how good he looks early, is going to moderate his pace. We get to round 3. Leo Santa Cruz comes out. Not 93 punches, not 97 punches. He throws 102 punches. 102. So then we get to round 4. Leo Santa Cruz throws 97 punches. You know what happens in round 5, don't you? After Munoz has been dealing with a guy who has thrown a minimum of 93 punches a round, Munoz finally gets knocked out. Right? That's a Santa Cruz fight. Let's talk about another one. Abner Maris. Here's a guy who's actually returning fire back. Right? You know, Abner Maris, he's not shy to pull the trigger. Maris shows up, he throws 980 punches in a 12-round fight. Do the math, right? Maris is there going for his, right? Guess what? If Maris's game plan was to outthrow Leo Santa Cruz, he missed the mark because Leo Santa Cruz threw 1,057 punches in the fight. 12-round fight. He throws 1,057 punches at a guy who's throwing 980 punches back at him. Now, some guys know how to drive fast, right? We all have that cousin who you're in the car and you're thinking, my God, how is this guy driving this fast on these side streets, right? You make a turn and, you're reaching up for that little clothing rack thing, but hell, you're desperate to grab something because you're fearful that the car's going to turn over. That's Leo Santa Cruz. Right? Leo Santa Cruz is going for it. Understand, against Maris, in the middle of a snowstorm, where Maris is throwing 980 punches back at him, Leo Santa Cruz lands 35% of his punches. High volume, high percentage. Right? By contrast, Maris lands significantly less. He only lands 287 punches of the 980 he throws. Right? Now let's contrast that with Carl Frampton. Now, can we agree that Scott Quigg, who, by the way, is picking Leo Santa Cruz in this fight, Scott Quigg comes out and, by his own admission, starts slowly. How slowly? According to CompuBox, in the first round of their fight, Quigg throws 5 punches. Second round, 11 punches. Third round, 14 punches. Right? Let's just say Scott Quigg isn't active. Neither is Carl Frampton. Frampton throws 30 punches in the first round against Scott Quigg. 30. Second round, 48. Third round, 36. Fourth round, 40. Frampton, you might be shocked to learn, in the 12 rounds against Quigg, and keep in mind, he's dealing with a guy who's hardly throwing anything back early. Frampton never throws 80 punches in any of the 12 rounds. He only has one round where he's above 72 punches thrown. Think about this too. I want you to look at the tape of the fight, the CompuBox numbers. Frampton only throws 592 punches in the entire fight. He only lands 14% of them. Right? Scott Quigg, believe it or not, throwing far fewer punches, lands 2 more punches than Frampton, and actually ends the fight landing 26.4% of his punches. Now, I picked Frampton in a pre-fight video here. Frampton delivered for me. I thought Frampton won the fight. Right? But understand, Frampton is lower volume. Right? Frampton, to me, probably has the better skills than Leo Santa Cruz. He seems to frame his shots. He doesn't rely on pacing as much. But this is a bad matchup for him. Right? Understand, Santa Cruz is in that no hangover zone of his career. He's young. He takes chances because he hasn't been in car crashes. Right? He's running red lights. He's going to throw much higher volume than Carl Frampton. I know Frampton has never lost. In my opinion here, Frampton cannot win a decision. Santa Cruz is likely to throw dozens of more punches at Carl Frampton than Frampton is likely to throw back. I believe Frampton only has a puncher's chance in the fight. Let's also talk about the size. Santa Cruz is a little bit bigger physically. Look at the length. Santa Cruz knows how to throw a lot of jabs. Let me say this too. One of the problems with being a counterpuncher is that you can get beaten by a lot of volume. Right? If the other guy has a jab, so that when you try to counter him, he's a little bit further away. Right? You yourself are out of the pocket because you don't want to get hit with that jab. Right then, as you go to counter him, the guy is still throwing punches. Right? In my opinion, that's a nightmare for a counterpuncher. So just like I picked Santa Cruz over Regundio. That fight hasn't happened yet. I'm guessing it's going to happen down the road. I'm picking Santa Cruz over Carl Frampton. Right? I think Santa Cruz is just too active. Right? He's that young drinker who's not worried about getting a hangover, who's in the drinking contest with you. Right? The guy who doesn't care whether it's cheap beer or Heineken. Right? I think Santa Cruz is just the guy who is too much for Carl Frampton. Frampton likes to set traps and have people thinking. What happens if the guy in front of you is running the red light? He's not getting the implicit threats that you're trying to set up. I think it's a bad fight for Frampton. I think Santa Cruz dominates the match. I'll agree, Frampton has a punch. There's always a chance for a guy with a punch to get a KO. The bet I'm recommending is Leo Santa Cruz to win the fight, hedged with Carl Frampton by KO. One thing I think is clear, though. Santa Cruz is not going to come out in the first round like Scott Quigg did and throw 5 punches. Right? That's just not going to happen. Frampton's not going to be able to build up an early lead. I think Santa Cruz is going to probably win, and I'm guessing here, 4 or 5 of the first 6 rounds. Right? 4 or 5 of the first 6 rounds. I know Frampton was able to deal with the aggression of people like Kiko Martinez. Right? Santa Cruz is different. He's using length. He's using a lot more jabs while he's coming in with very high volume. I like Santa Cruz in this one. I'm going to hedge the play, though.